In the 80s, every time you went to the toy shelves, you saw some new world represented in a brand new toy line. And you knew that that toy line may go on for years and become a beloved storyline, and you would invest in and spend time in this fantasy world. Each time you saw a new toy line, it was like an invitation to a new fantasy world where you could be a part of the adventure, and it might go on for years. And so it was always exciting. And a lot of times it just didn't survive very long. These are 10 of those stories, fantasy worlds that we got a glimpse of, but alas, just didn't last very long. That maybe should have, maybe deserve more time, or maybe don't, and were a complete flop. But here's 10 obscure action figure lines from the 80s. Ranked. And now the ranking here is going to be how much I desperately want these things, okay? And want them to survive and want to see more of them. These are not the big ones. This is not Thundercats and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. These are the ones that barely anybody remembers. I vaguely remember these, and some of these I had, and some of these I just want. But I do remember that feeling of when you got one, you were like, oh, cool, this is going to be the next big thing. Nope. this case, no, it was not the next big thing. These are things that absolutely died and maybe should have, or maybe could have gone on forever. Number 10, we have the Manglors. Now, what Manglors were, when I did have a couple of Manglors, and I loved this when I saw this concept, it was the coolest thing ever. These are action figures that they lived on a weird planet, and there were monsters. There weren't like almost no humans on the planet. There was a humanoid-looking Manglor guy. But the great concept of Manglors was you rip off their limbs, and then you could stick their limbs back on, and they would like heal.
Introducing Manglors. They're made from some of the strangest stuff on Earth. There's Manglodactyl, Manglosaurus, and Manglor, each sold separately.
So there was just like the coolest. You could stretch and squish them and then rip them apart and put them back together. And then you could even make your own Manglors by like ripping one's head off and putting the head on the other. You know, they came in a shell, so you could break apart an egg and like birth your Manglor, and then you had this Manglor in it with this sticky material that you could rip apart and put back together. I did have two of these. I had the main Manglor and I had the pterodactyl looking Manglor monster. Now Manglors are one that had it worked, it would be awesome, but it doesn't work. And really what happened is you could put on the arm. I actually found that I could put the arm on and off a few times, but then like anything, when you don't have anything that's like putty, you'll notice like a few weeks later, it's covered in like dust particles and like hairs, and it's sticky, it's covered in gunk, and nobody wants to play with it anymore. And also they found that when you ripped off the arm and you put the arm back together, unless you put it on exactly right, it didn't really go on, and so you were just left with a toy that was in tatters. And if you're a particularly ADHD kid, you probably ripped the shit out of that thing and immediately, you know, cried because you had a brand new toy that was in tatters. So Manglors, a really cool concept. Had it worked, it did not. Number 9, Photon Warriors. Now, Photon Warriors is basically a ripoff of Laser Tag. And I remember getting the set where you had the main warrior and a 4-armed enemy, and basically you could play laser tag with them. So you could run around the house and shoot and register whether or not you hit each other. So it was like a fun little thing to have, like a laser tag. And also had an action figure and a whole world and a TV show, and was going to expand into have even more action figures had the line survived, which it did not. Only a couple figures were actually produced. The promise of other figures was there, but we just didn't get them. I do think that villain character does look pretty great.
Prevailed, and the warriors who used it ruled. Photon.
Next in line, we have the Defenders of the Earth. Now, this is a really great concept that I think has legs, that I think if done right could be awesome. I think, and it has been revived recently for collectors. There's a new set of the Defenders of the Earth action figures. But this is like a super team of 1940s superheroes. So this is like, what a cool idea to take all the heroes from the 40s serials and Pulp Fiction and comics and, you know, Pulp Fiction novels and put them into a superhero team.
Defenders of the Earth!
They got here just in time because evil Ming the Merciless is about to turn the Earth into a frozen snow cone!
So we have Mandrake the Magician, the Phantom, and Flash Gordon all come together to form like a superhero team. Now, this would have been an awesome line had it lasted very long, and but I remember getting into them. I had the Phantom figure. I was very fascinated by the Pulp Fiction and those storylines. They're kind of hard to come by, hard to find. I think had this had expanded, it would have been awesome to bring the Shadow in or bringing in other heroes and villains from that era. It would have been fun to see that go on for a few years. It didn't take off, and so we'll never know what that could have been. But it is a great idea, and it would make a pretty cool movie. Next in line, we have Robo Force. Now, Robo Force is a very cool toy line. They're kind of adorable little robots, which I think maybe hurts it a bit, is because you don't necessarily want an adorable robot to battle. You want like killer robots, and you want cool ass looking killer robots like Soundwave. You don't want an adorable robot. They're all little fat, little adorable robots, and so they make for a pretty good toy, but not necessarily a good toy line. They did have a whole mythology with comic books and all kinds of things, and each figure would have a suction cap bottom, so you could stick it onto a wall or onto your fridge, and it also had a feature where it had arms that could crush you.
Presenting Ideal's Robo Force, Max Steel the leader, and the brave Robo Force Warrior robots with crusher arms and whipper bases.
But they all basically have like an R2-D2 cuteness to them that makes it not really work, and competing against Transformers, it didn't survive long. I did have one of them, thought it was pretty fun. Next we have M-Force. Now what M-Force is muscle men, right? This is a extraordinarily violent like line of action figures, all based on roided out superheroes of the 80s in action movies. It felt like more like an adult action figure line where all the guys, nobody wears a shirt in M-Force, right? That's like, shirts are forbidden. And you have a guy that looks like Stallone, and a guy that looks like Ivan Drago, and a guy that looks like Dolph Lundgren, and a guy that looks like Snake Plissken, and a guy that looks like Schwarzenegger, and they all have massive weapons. And there were some pretty cool sets though, that if you were looking for that like commando style action figure, very violent, military weapons, muscular dudes. If you really wanted a commando action figure set, was better than the commando action figure toy line, which was terrible. So M-Force was for you. Next we have the Infaceables. Now the Infaceables was a really cool line of toys in which you pressed a button and their face got sucked in by a mechanism, revealing a kind of creepy face underneath. A lot of these are pretty horrific looking, but I was into them. I had a couple of these things. The play function of pressing a little button and the face would get all creepy was kind of interesting, but a lot of this, it didn't go very far, and there wasn't much lore behind it. So that wasn't a cartoon to really that I remember that could give you like the lore, and it had just like a few vehicles that looked pretty bad, but that feature was very cool. As a result, that feature apparently does not survive very well today, and if you have an Infaceables, the chance that your face is still intact is pretty slim. That thin piece of plastic has been destroyed by now. So if you find one that's really intact, it's worth something.
Imagine mystic warriors of change. They are infaceable like a lube.
Next in line, we have the Supernaturals. Now, the Supernaturals had a great gimmick. They had sort of hologram images in them. So they made it look like they were ghostly. And they had a pretty good, interesting look to them. They had minimal articulation, but the gimmick was nice, and you got a good selection of medieval weapons and even a play set. Where it lacked is we didn't get much of a storyline, and so it didn't really know where to go with it. You could make your own story up, but for me, I was always attracted to anything creepy, anything like horror related. I love horror shit, as you can see in this. I talk about horror in my other channel in this video. So anything horror related for me was always great. And so immediately I grabbed a couple of these, and alas, it didn't survive. Next in line, we have the Animaxx. Now, Animaxx was a really cool series where you had like animal drivers in Mad Max Warrior style cars that had crazy weapons. So this was like it was a car focused, vehicle focused line where you had a driver that was some sort of animal, had some weapons with him. The design of the vehicles was really pretty great. Check out the innovation in this play set.
Animaxx, the time of Animaxx.
When good battles evil. Enter the battle for the Bridge of Doom.
Attack, Road Trainer!
The incredible Animaxx playset. Look out for the Motor Mutant's swinging blade.
Gotcha!
And the Road Trainer's battering ram.
Where you have a sort of bridge that the Animaxx can battle against. I remember grabbing like one of these and seeing the potential of it, and then it just sort of disappeared. Next, we have the Bone Age. Now, Bone Age is one of those, I don't even remember this at all, but it is awesome, and I would like to go back in time and get some Bone Age. It's a vehicle-focused toy line where you have cavemen drivers, but the great and innovative, interesting thing is you can take these bones and reform them, sort of transform them or rebuild them into vehicles. So you have like a pterodactyl skeleton and shoots, and you know that, and sometimes they have features like they'll shoot off their tail, spike or whatever, and then you take this skeleton and you reform it into a ship of some sort. It makes no sense whatsoever, even in a fantasy world context. I don't even know how you would make a storyline around this that would make any sense to anybody, but just an awesome idea, a really cool, fun line, and I can imagine it being really fun to take all the bones and put together some sort of really horrific thing. Had it lasted a couple more years, who knows where it would have went, but it was a flop. However, it goes high on my list because I don't even remember this one. This is one that I did not remember, but man, it looks fun, and I wish I had known about it or picked up one or two back in the day.
T-Rex and Tritops, each sold separately with a caveman. Feel the power of Bone Age.
Number one, and this one is called Spiral Zone, and this has an absolute fascinating story. I remember having a few of these, and they were really good looking figures. They had cloth clothes, they had a lot of weapons, some kind of brutal looking weapons, especially some of the villains. And the concept of Spiral Zone is it's a post-apocalyptic world in which the world has been taken over by there's only spiral zones or these places and pockets of where you can be, free from the influence of this evil mastermind who's controlling everything, sort of zombifying and turning ordinary people into his evil minions. And the heroes have to go against this menace and try to save the world. So really fascinating and interesting interesting concept. It also had some pretty great vehicles, like this monocycle, which is sort of like the main Spiral Zone vehicle. Just has a really cool look. It really feels to me like a Cannon Films action movie, something like Cyborg, the movie with Jean-Claude Van Damme, or something like that, put into an action figure line. Something about it, I really just love the design of these characters. I remember grabbing a couple of them, being really caught up in that, in the design of them, and the weapons and the way you could attach the weapons to them, and then the story really had a lot of potential. Unfortunately, did not last very long, and is just one of those weird curiosities of the 80s. A story that had potential that we will never see the end of, unless somebody wants to reboot Spiral Zone today. Who knows? They're rebooting everything. It's possible. But that's my list of the 10 cool, obscure toy lines from the 80s that I wanted, but wanted to continue, but didn't. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything I missed or anything like this that you would love to have seen go on for years. And if you're interested in more action figure weirdness, check out this video right here.